Okay, so we have this database query which has different tables in relating to invoices and vendors. So you can look at the database schema from the drive where it is updated. So basically, when we look at the tables, we have contact updates. So I went ahead and I created them: GL accounts, invoice archive, invoice line items, invoices, invoices paid, terms, and vendors. So there are 5 queries, and the first query was about getting the invoices. So, and then the second query was little complicated. So, and the third query was about money owed. So let's see quickly what have I done on the first query. So first query, select all the invoices. So the invoices over here, you see, select all invoices. So that is fine. So we'll come back to the second query later because that has 2 parts and one part is complicated. So let's see. Now the third query was on finding the payment owed. So I'm assuming that the payment money owed formula is invoice total minus payment total minus credit total, and where payment date is null. So payment date is updated when the entire invoice is paid. Okay, but you can go ahead and put there's an invoices paid table in which you definitely can update it over here with the date field of payment date. But if in the invoices table payment date is null, I'm assuming that when the payment is not fully made. So okay, the third query was that, and the fourth query was we had to insert a record for the new vendor with a new invoice amount, right? So in order to do that, you need to have GL account. So I went ahead and I created some GL account. We need to have the terms record, so I created the terms record, and then we can create the vendors record. So in the when you're creating the vendors record, you need to mention the terms and account. And once you do that, you can go ahead and insert your invoices for that particular vendor. And when we create that invoice, initially the total is 0. So if you see, the total is 0 on top. And later when we add line items for that particular invoice, so we fetch that invoice ID using this scope identity function. It is a Microsoft SQL Server function specifically. In different databases it might be a different function. So we go ahead and we get the line item. We create a line items. So in this case I have created 2 line items, and every time it creates a line item I add the total, invoice total, and I increase the sequence number. So and I go ahead and I put in the line items, and that's how this query works, of creating a vendor and the related invoices and the related line items. And the last query is about there's a vendor ID incorrectly been updated, so we have to update it with the correct vendor ID, which is data reproduction scope. So it's pretty much update query. So let's see that update query. So you see, so there are definitely 3 key table, 3 tables where invoices are stored with that vendor ID. So we just go ahead and we take the correct vendor ID, we try to find what is the correct vendor ID, then we try to find what is the incorrect vendor ID for this particular name, and then we go ahead and update it. appropriately in all the tables: invoices, invoices archive, and invoices paid. So coming back to the second query, so there are two parts. One is we need the top 10 invoice amounts, and so this part is done in this query. Select top 10 from invoices where order by, this is a very important thing, order by invoice total. It sorts it out in a manner where it starts with the maximum amount to minimum amount. So we just take the top 10 and we get those total amount, this dollar amount, and the top 10 records. But the second part was we wanted to know for each of those invoices what was the last invoice date for the vendor associated with that. So I commented that this is little complicated and it requires multi joins, so it got complicated and it could not solve it. So but you need to understand the problem. So here we had invoices, right? Then so we had two line items, I1, okay, so let's say X and Y, and there were vendors associated with it, right? So vendors 1 and 2. So here you may have more records, let's say A, B. So when let's say in this case, if we had to select top 2 records, so this top 2 would come with the top totals, for example, and let's say this was associated with these 2 vendors. So this is fine. So that is, we've got like top 10. In this case we are taking an example of top 2 and assuming X and Y has the maximum amounts. Now it is possible that A is associated with so let's take a different color. So the second part of the query is A is the last invoice. A is the record with the last invoice date. So in this case it's 37. So this is where 37 is associated with record A. So this invoice is associated with, let's say, 1. And in the same way, let's assume that this also is 3007, but they are not in the top 2. You see, they are still below the top 2. So if we had to, assuming the date for X was 2907, right, and let's say this is 2807. Let's delete this and type again. So what the output should be, so this is the output you need. Okay, the output should be X, 2907 is the invoice date, and let's say $100 is the amount, right? So whatever the dollar amount, but the last invoice date is 37. So this is what the output should be. And in this case the vendor should be 1 and in this case the vendor should be 2. So the query failed because it was filtered on vendor ID, so it would pick up just the first query it would take 2 records, so with a dollar amount, but when we run the second condition it filters out with the vendor ID. So that has to be worked out, because invoices table join on vendors, then the vendors have to join back on the invoices to fetch all the records. So it is a reverse join again, and involves the tables 2 joins. So that was a complicated part, and so I could not solve it, so I kept it aside. So we don't want to now spend more time right now on this, but if I find the solution I will send it to you. And let's see how we try to save it in the, so let's say this was a result. We can, we want to save it in a spreadsheet. So you do get an CSV option, which is comma delimiter file. So you say my results. Okay, let's update this file itself. So replace it. So all those records are there now. So now if you go into my accounts and open my results, you have all this results over here, right? But another way of getting into the spreadsheet is actually making a database connection from here. So select data. So let's say from other source we are connecting to a SQL server, and let's say that's my local server. I use a Windows authentication. I connect. Okay, so connected is asking me which database. So I say Murach DB. I don't want to connect to any table, so I go ahead and I say my Murach query. So, and then I say finish. Do you want to replace? It has an older file, so it's asking me whether I want to replace. So I say go ahead, replace, and just select any table, that's fine. But at this point, if you click OK, you're going to get that table, whichever was selected. But we don't want that. We want to have a query, a specific query. So you select properties, go into definition, command type is SQL, and then you put your query over here. So let's say in this case, for example, we have this query. So we go ahead and put this query, and we click OK. It's trying to proceed with changes, yes, and paste it at D3. So you see, you get your records. So now every time the records change in the database, you want to refresh it, you just click refresh and it will simply refresh. You don't have to reconnect again, and that's how the spreadsheet can be saved and sent to your boss or anybody who needs this report. Or you can modify this file. You can take a copy of this and paste it over here and format it as per the way you want it. Okay, so there was some issue. Anyways, it's coming in date format, but it's actually a number, so we can work on that as well. So let's see if we can change it here by formatting it. Number. Okay, so that's the invoice ID. So there might be some issues, and you have to format it the way you like it and then save it. So that's how we all the queries are solved, and the spreadsheet file is created. So there's one query which was not fully solved. You can see out of the 5 questions, one question had 2 questions again. So one part was solved, but the other part of that invoice date, the last invoice date, is complicated. So if I find the answer, I'll update the drive, and I will share it in my YouTube description as well. So thank you so much.